Welcome to Mini Fights. My name is Brian, and today I'm hosting George and Gabe, so I'll be filming from the third person, while George's unaffiliated grab bag of characters fights Gabe's Asgard. Real quick note before we get started, the wrong tokens are down for the alien ship crashes mission, or I should say crisis. So the tokens you see there, the purple ones, those are origin bombs. We fix it here in a few minutes, but those are rubble, and they are searched for a Kree core. Gabe starts this 20 threat conflict off by double advancing Ultron to the far side rubble and searching for the Kree core. As always, the Kree core is elusive. George's Doc Ock climbs up onto the auto parts store using wall crawler, and he's going to advance again to that rubble that Ultron's standing near and attempt to search it for the Kree core as well. And he has about as much luck as Ultron did. And back to Gabe. His trickster god Loki advances twice up to the left side rubble, which we now have the correct tokens on the table, so hooray for us. He's going to interact, rolls the dice off camera because he's new to this. There they are, didn't find it. Back to George. Nice long advance of Black Panther, not quite close enough though to interact with the rubble. Still needs to push himself forward just a little bit, so he spends a second move action to do that. And he digs through the dirt as well, with similar results to everybody else. Gabe's Hela double advances to the center. This is also on a gamma shelter. She does not find the Kree core. Back to George. His Modoc advances. He is inside the first shelter. Throws a Sonic Blast at Hela. Deals no damage, but saps a power from her. Now that's going to put his power total up to 2, which is going to allow him to throw a taxi cab directly at Hela, which deals a point of damage to her. As you can see, it removes the taxi from the table. Gabe Shuri advances, shoots her Panther gauntlets at Modoc, and this ends up dealing a point of damage to him, generating some power for Shuri, and pushing Modoc straight back. George's lightning fast Zemo sprints to the center gamma shelter, but decides it is beneath him to dig through the dirt for the Kree core. Before Gabe decides what model he wants to activate, he decides to use advanced R&D, pushing 3 power from Shuri to Thor, Hela, and Ultron. Thor activates, advances forward, and then screams for Asgard, charging into Zemo. Now for Asgard, has 2 components, an advance and a strike. The strike on Zemo ends up dealing a total of 2 damage after the Zemo reroll, but because Gabe rolled a wild and dealt damage, Zemo is thrown and is also staggered, which means he's going to lose an action point the next time he activates. And Thor ends his activation by digging through the rubble a little bit. Still no Kree core. And apologies here, I just kind of missed filming that move, but Crossbones advances forward onto the gamma shelter and ends his activation. And because George has more models than Gabe, he basically is activating the last 2 models of the round. Black Widow double advances and cannot find the Kree core on the right side. So that's going to end round 1. That's pretty typical of what a Gamma Waves alien ships looks like on round 1. A bunch of searching for Kree cores that usually doesn't work. And then the rest of the forces on each side huddling down that middle line. As far as the round goes, the scoring, Gabe is going to score 3 to George's 1. At this point, it does look like Gabe has the advantage, certainly in VPs and in attrition. He's staggered Zemo. He's got arguably the more elite force, although he is 1 less model. So it's really up to George to kind of leverage his higher model count and see if he can hopefully get the Kree core first. I think that's going to be his win condition in this one. I don't think he's going to be able to really play a let's kill all your models type game against Asgard when the scenario is just 3 Gamma Shelters down the middle. It's too compact. That really plays to Thor's strengths. And round 2 kicks off with Loki attempting to find the Kree core in the rubble there closest to the camera. Doesn't find it and gets the hell out of Dodge. He does not relish fighting Black Panther at close range. George's Black Widow searches the same spot, doesn't find a Kree core, advances to the middle, and uses her Kung Fu to strike Thor. This is going to end up dealing a point of damage to Thor and take a power from him due to Widow's Sting. Black Widow spends the power she gained from the strike to search for the Kree core, and she finds it on the middle point. And as you would expect, the attacks start raining her way. Gabe Shuri activates and Panther gauntlets at Widow. This is going to deal a point of damage and push her in a shocking turn of events. Panther gauntlets are still warm, fires again, deals yet another point of damage, pushes her again, this time up against the size 3 tank. George's Crossbones lumbers forward next to the tank and checks his ranges just to make sure he's still got range to Widow and is not within range to the Asgardians, angling to use the mission objective card later in the turn. Thunderboy Ultron decides to fly up onto the auto parts store and shoots down an energy blast at Zemo, but it deals 0 damage and he ends his activation. George's MODOK advances forward and Psionic Blast Thor. This ends up dealing 3 points of damage to him and sapping one of his power. MODOK then uses that captured power to hurl the size 3 Hydra light tank at Thor, but Gabe wisely decides to use the Brace for Impact Tactics card, so he spends 1 power to take no damage from the potentially 4 damage throw. Thor charges in with 4 Asgard after healing himself for a point of damage using the Asgard leadership ability. He strikes MODOK for total damage, and then he uses his superpower, the strongest Avenger there is, to throw George's MODOK into Zemo. Now this would be a tremendous amount of damage to Zemo, also another damage on MODOK. George wisely decides to use Brace for Impact, taking no damage on either. Thor turns his attention to Crossbones, wailing him with a strike. But Crossbones is inured to pain and takes no damage. However, Thor did trigger the wild, so there's going to be a throw. Gabe throws Crossbone into Black Widow, which is going to deal enough damage to daze her. However, right as she's hitting the floor, she manages to hand the objective off to Crossbones using the mission objective card. So now Crossbones is the Kree core carrier, and Gabe is going to have to hunt him instead of Black Widow. George's Black Panther decides to run to the center Gamma Shelter and strikes Hela with his Vibranium Claws, dealing no damage. The attack does push her up against the Jersey barrier, and that is Black Panther's activation. Zemo groggily shakes off the stagger condition, draws his rapier, and puts it right into Thor's eyeball, giving Thor a nice eye patch for future movies, and dazing him. This was a Steel Rush attack, so he gets to do a medium advance, which he uses to get onto the Gamma Shelter in the middle. Hela, Queen of Hell, advances to the center Gamma Shelter and unleashes her 2 captured souls into Crossbones. This only ends up dealing a total of 3 damage somehow, that he endures to pain down to 2. Crossbones is just a massive scar tissue. He's hard to damage. The last activation on the round is going to be George's Doc Ock advancing forward, and then advancing forward again to stand on the center Gamma Shelter. And that's going to end round 2. That's a pretty interesting one. George is going to actually take a nice VP chunk out of Gabe here. He's going to go from 1 to 6 because he gets 5 points this turn for holding 2 shelters and the Kree Core. Gabe is only going to get 1. So the score is now 6-4 going into round 3. I think that round went about as good as George could have hoped. He's still not really able to do as much damage as Gabe's Asgardians can, but he did hold on to the Kree Core due to a good use of mission objective and the sort of general hardiness of Crossbones. He's going to have to kind of continue to ride that out and hopefully hold at least 1, if not 2 Gamma Shelters for as long as he possibly can. At the end of last round, Ultron did take a point of damage from the Gamma Rain. And now Thor unleashes his lightning. It fries MODOK's hair for 2 damage. Doc Ock's tendrils go straight as he takes 4 and is dazed. Deals 2 damage to Baron Zemo, who desperately lines up a counterattack to stop this onslaught from this giant Viking Chad, but it deals no damage. And then Crossbones ends up taking 2 damage, thankfully inured to pain, saving him from enough damage to actually daze him. Crossbones, never one to really think things through, decides to advance towards Thor using his aggressive role. Thor spends his second action point to strike Crossbones, hoping to finish him off and pick up the Kree Core, which would probably end the game. However, Crossbones is basically immune to blunt trauma, and after all the dust is cleared, he ends up taking no damage from the strike due to inured to pain, because only 1 damage really came through and it got removed. He then gets thrown into Widow, still has enough power to inure to pain that damage as well, so still doesn't get dazed, but Widow does take 3 damage from the collision. George realizes that he needs to activate his Widow now. She has 1 stamina left before she's knocked out of the game. She strikes Hela and actually deals 2 damage. This is going to top her power up to having a full 5, which she immediately uses to patch up Crossbones back to his full 6 stamina. So a huge swing there of Crossbones not dying, and he is now back to full health. She strikes Hela again, and this deals no damage, and that ends her activation. Asgard's Wakandan pal decides to Panther Gauntlets Zemo, who only has 1 remaining stamina, and easily dazes him. She turns her Panther Gauntlets to MODOK, deals a point of damage to him as well, and pushes him almost completely outside of the Gamma Shelter. George's MODOK shakes Stagger, advances forward to the Gamma Shelter that he keeps getting pushed off of. He's going to use the Field Dressing card to wake up the groggy Doc Ock, which is going to heal a point of damage on him and remove the dazed condition from him. This costs 4 power. He then uses his remaining power to throw the red car at Thor, and that's going to end up dealing a point of damage to him. And his attention's still on Thor. He makes Thor bow to his will, grit his teeth, and advance against his will outside of the Gamma Shelter. It's Gabe's Hela's turn, and she's immediately going to turn her attention to Zemo, who has 1 stamina remaining because he was sort of woken up by field dressings. Deals like 5 or something just deletes him. Gains a captured soul token to put herself on 3. She then spends all 3 using her Mystic Attack on Black Panther. A 9-die Mystic Attack, which is really his worst defense by far. This ends up dealing 5, which is enough to daze him as well. She gains 2 of the captured souls immediately back, 1 from Black Panther going down and 1 from the attack being successful. I think it might be on a wild if I remember correctly. George's Crossbones strikes back at Hela, is only going to end up dealing a total of 2 damage. He then moves back to the closest Gamma Shelter to his deployment zone. Gabe's Ultron swoops down from the auto parts store and lines up an energy blast on Crossbones. This is going to deal a total of 2 damage after Crossbones uses his Inure to Pain superpower. Ultron then uses his throw to throw the streetlights at MODOK, which deals 1 point of damage. Last model to activate is Loki. He advances to the center, and he unleashes his They're Not Magic Tricks, They're Illusions on Crossbones. It deals no damage, and he does not hit the double wild to make Crossbones move. And that is going to wrap up the round. Black Widow is going to die to gamma radiation poisoning, as she only had 1 stamina and she's not inside of one of the shelters. Looks like everybody else is in a shelter except for Thor, I believe, so he's going to take a point of damage as well. I do mess up the tracking here. It'll be correct on the graphics. It's not correct here in the video. George got 2 VPs to Gabe's 3 for holding the 2 gamma shelters on the right side of the table. I think we're seeing the Asgard attrition sort of really starting to ramp up. George did a great job of holding on to the Kree Corps with the heals and the mission objective and all that stuff. So he is still in this game, and he still does have a VP lead. It's really just, can he hold on here, fingernails on the cliffside, as you know, Thor beats up his team, which is really kind of what it's looking like is going to occur. Thor and Hela are really going to cause a lot of damage, but causing damage doesn't win you games necessarily, so let's see how it goes. And round 4 begins with MODOK, who has 1 stamina remaining, activating. He Doomsday Chairs Thor, which deals 2 points of damage. The Doomsday Chair attack then goes into Ultron, but deals no damage. It would apply bleed, but Ultron is an android, or robot or something, without blood. He then Psionic Blast Thor, desperate to finish off Thor, and the dice have just not gone George's way during this activation at all. He deals, I think, 1 damage here, saps a power. Thor activates, advances into the pocket of every model on Earth, and you know what's coming. He unleashes the lightning and the thunder on like 4 characters. So he deals 1 to MODOK, that dazes him. He deals 5 to Crossbones. That dazes him. He's going to drop the core. So Crossbones finally meets his match with lightning. Thor does not have enough power to pick the core up, unfortunately. So the core lands right there. He's going to deal a point of damage to Doc Ock. And then barely, almost killed Zemo. Left him on 1 HP. Most of George's team at this point is like that black silhouette with the skeleton flashing through it. That's Zemo counterattacking, doesn't do anything to Thor, and then Thor's activation ends with Hela healing him to full with a 4 power patch up. And yeah, that's Thor, and that's George's good cheer, probably. Panther sympathizes with his crew of unaffiliated Misfit Toys, uses his Kinetic Blast with all the dice added to it and the Mantle reroll to kablooey Hela into the Daze condition, so she will not activate this turn. George then does some interesting measurement and zigs instead of zagging, and there's Black Panther. Apologies, I actually missed something here when I was filming. Shuri kills Zemo by dealing 1 point of damage to him. She then, with her second AP, attacks Black Panther. Both of these are Panther Gauntlet attacks. Deals a point of damage to Black Panther and shoves him off there into the corner. Back to George. His Doc Ock activates and arm lasers Loki and annihilates him. He then arm lasers Ultron and annihilates him too. So dazes both of the characters that have yet to activate and picks up the Kree Corps. So somehow George has got himself right back in this game with this massive 10 damage Doc Ock activation. So keep in mind the scoring again on the board is 1 off. So Gabe has got 8 and George should have 12. Going into round 5, we got a wild one. I think the same thing applies. At this point, probably Gabe's win condition is to just table George. just kill all his models, which doesn't seem out of the realm of possibility. And George needs to run away with the Kree Corps and try to conserve his models for as long as possible at this point, and just probably give up on the Gamma Shelters. And the round begins with Thor doing his usual Thor stuff. He strikes MODOK and hurls him into Crossbones. The strike damage plus the throw collision is going to be enough to kill MODOK. It also deals 4 damage to Crossbones, but he does inure to pain, superpower down to 3 damage taken. Thor then strikes Doc-Ock, dealing, I believe, 3 damage. And because the throw is away, he doesn't really have a good spot to put him. So he instead uses his superpower, Strongest Avenger there is, to throw him into Black Panther. This deals another point to Doc-Ock, and it deals a couple of points to Black Panther. George's Doc-Ock activates, and unfortunately it looks like he's kind of spent up his batteries on those arm lasers. He deals 0 damage to Hela with his first one, and only 1 point of damage to her on the second one. So looks like the dice math has swung back in the favor of average. Speaking of some good dice, here comes Hela. She does a Reign of Hell on Doc-Ock. This is enough to kill him. He drops the Kree Corps, which she immediately snaps up. She then spends all 3 of her captured soul tokens, sends Black Panther to the Shadow Realm, wailing on him with a Mystic Attack, easily doing the last point of stamina he has remaining. So he is dead as well. And George's last model, Crossbones, takes a big Haymaker Overpower swing at Thor. Only ends up dealing, I believe, a point of damage. And that attack pushes him a little bit forward and within 1 of Thor, still on the Gamma Shelter. He then strikes and deals no damage to Thor. And that is George's last activation of the game. The Viking robot decides to stand on the back Gamma Shelter and Energy Blast Crossbones. This deals 2 damage, which is reduced to 1 by Inure to Pain. And Shuri activates Panther Gauntlets like she does. This is going to deal 1 point of damage, pretty predictably, obviously, to Crossbones. Now, the tricky part here, Loki, who has not really done much this game, has Crossbones inside of his aura that makes superpowers cost more. So Inure to Pain is actually costing 2 every time. That means that the couple power he had on him can't stop the 2 attacks from Shuri. So the second one comes through, deals the point of damage, and removes him. And that is a tabling, and that is an automatic win for Gabe. Additionally, we counted out the VPs. Gabe would get 8 VPs this turn. So he essentially tabled and hit 16 VP with the same kill there on Crossbones. So he had 2 win conditions and he hit them both simultaneously. Interesting game, right? I think, it's pretty easy to look at the rosters that were chosen, or the squads that were chosen, and say that George's team was a little suboptimal. I think that's fair. Not playing an affiliation is arguably probably not the best way to play, at least right now in this game. I thought he was pretty. He put a real game effort forward, and some of his tactical card use really kept him in the game, and some of the explosions of damage from Doc-Ock and things like that really kept him in there. I don't think that team's really going to stand much of a chance ultimately in Gamma Shelters against a Thor Hela frontline, which is just one of the highest output of damage and throws, and it's just so vicious. Tons of healing, condition removal so you can't stagger them. You don't really want to play Asgard on Gamma Shelters anyway, but you need a team that can deal more damage and sort of absorb more damage than what George brought today. So he was playing a little down, I think disadvantaged, made a real game out of it, but ultimately, the attritional power of Asgard prevailed. So that's going to be it for us. Thanks to both Gabe and to George for participating and letting me fill their game and kibitz and stick my hands in the film and move the dice around and all that stuff. They were real good sports about it. Good dudes. And thanks to you for watching. And before I let you go, I do want to real quickly plug a few things. If you look down in the comments below, in the video summary, you're going to see links to a whole bunch of friends of the show. And this isn't me trying to sell you anything. This is mostly just other MCP content creators that I think you should check out. There's a few awesome blogs that you should check out. There is another couple channels, YouTube channels, as well as podcasts that I really like. Definitely give them a go. The content creation community for this game is relatively small at this point, and I think we should all just be kind of working together to get everybody's eyes on everything. It's all really good stuff that I've linked down there for you. The one thing I will try to sell you, I guess, is in that section there is a link to an Etsy store. If you're interested in the 3D printed card and token holders, that's where you can get those. Thanks so much for watching this video. We are going to be creating new content each week. We're likely going to go to a multiple video per week format. The other videos will be things like painting, tactics talks, etc. Stay tuned for that. Share the channel with your pals, like and subscribe, and all that jazz. And we'll see you next week. Thanks.